Hey friends, it's me Toho, and welcome back to another Legion Tower Defense 2 video. In this video, I show you how I became the best tier 1 player in all of Legion, POLLYWOG edition. If you haven't seen this series, you might want to go to the playlist and check out the previous ones, and I'll have that linked in the description. In them, I explain how top games work and break down each wave and our decision making. If you don't want to go watch it, I'll quickly explain it here. If you don't care or already know, please skip ahead to the time that I've put up here or look at the chapters. The top games are based off of the unit that you open with. It goes off how much gold is spent. So if I put down 7 looters, which is 70 gold, and 1 Nikomata, which is 60 gold, the game will count it as a looter game. Next is getting a higher power score by wave 10 than the person currently with the top game. This does fluctuate a bit depending on the player's rank. If I, a 2500 player, have a lower power score by 10 than the gold player that holds the current record, I can still get the top game. And finally, you have to win the game on top of the power score. Accomplish all this, and you make it a top game yourself. Okay, we know how this goes by now. Pick Fiesta? For real this time. I do think it was kind of funny that I thought I was Fiesta for that PoE game, both in editing and in the actual game. Okay, so pick Fiesta and grab a friend so I don't int anybody on the ladder. Especially because not only will I be leaking a lot, but early game I will be incoming every wave and throwing my teammate under the bus. This game I had the option for Proton or POLLYWOG, and I figured the Proton game would be way easier, so I decided to save it for later. I don't remember why I kept the Proton in my role, but it was probably because I was scared of an early Dragon Turtle since I would be full magic damage and didn't think the WoW Shroom was enough. So I tossed them down to make it easier to upgrade into an Atom, but made sure the majority of the gold that I spent was in the POLLYWOGs. Wave 1, and of course I get a snail. I think I've been snailed in almost every attempt, which makes sense because if you looked at my match history, every single game was Fiesta, so I couldn't be mad. Let's go ahead and quickly check the actual game audio to make sure. God damn it, I've been snailed every time I've tried this tonight! Okay, maybe a little peeved. And I did notice that a Fiesta player was sending into me, and if you play Fiesta, you know this is the worst possible situation, especially after the Burt change. Which I am sure I also wasn't angry about, but just to make sure, let's check. Just don't leak anymore. And of course another Fiesta is sending into me! No! Another Fiesta is sending into me, this is the second time! Just like I thought, completely okay with it. So they will be pushing workers hard, which means the sends I will get will be very big, making it hard for me to efficiently Fiesta. On top of that, with the Burt change, every time they do leak me, they get some extra gold themselves. Not a great situation. Wave 2, I went to Seraphim, hoping they had enough workers for a double snail send into me, and that I would pro league. I did get the double snail send, and was pretty excited. If I pro Fiesta this, I'm still in the game. Although, it turns out that Seraphim is just way too strong early game, and I just fully hold. I pushed to 6 workers for wave 3 because I didn't think the wave was long enough for the person sending into me to get a Dragon Turtle on income, which drastically reduces my chances of getting one. I did think it would be the double snail though, and I added 1 more Proton. It was the double snail, but again, my POLLYWOG was smurfing way too hard and I held. My ally was trying to get some pressure off of me and sent a Robo Snail into the Fiesta player, and actually got a pretty decent leak. I'm not gonna lie, I was getting a little annoyed that I kept holding, so I pushed 8 workers. In hindsight, it was a long wave, and if I had just gotten the Atom and been 7 workers, I probably would have pro Fiesta'd. We finally got the Dragon Turtle send, and you can see how long it takes the Seraphim in the POLLYWOGs to kill it, and why I was so nervous of it. I leaked pretty big here, and since I'm not great on 5 and Phoenix got skipped on wave 4, I only pushed 1 worker. I added a Wild Shroom to prepare for a Canopy on wave 6 if I got skipped here, and dropped another Proton to make sure I killed the mini boss. My ally had been skipped on 4, but assured me he was fine, or else I would have stayed 8 workers and tried to help cover. I get a double Dragon Turtle send and end up leaking a little bit more than I would like, but I looked over at my ally and sure enough, he was right. He just full held a 120 send on wave 5 with the help of a nice Smurf breaker.
It's time for learning with Toho.
Oathbreaker goes into its Unchained Rage form at 50% life. It gained insane attack speed and damage reduction. A Smurf Breaker is when it lives for an extended period of time in that form, resulting in incredible damage and stall. Wave 6, I pushed to 10 workers and sold a POLLYWOG for a Devilfish, which is an incredible tank for this wave. I then rerolled because I knew I would need some late game units, and yes, I see that I took Priestess of the Abyss and no Steed. I'm sure I had a good reason at the time, so let's move past it. I get sent here, and by now they've realized that Dragon Turtles can really hurt me if I start focusing them. I did end up killing my Seraphim pretty early, which isn't great, and I probably should have upgraded an Atom in the very back so the Protons could tank a bit for it. Look how long these Protons survive. Just imagine if it was an Atom. Anyway, I get a respectable 40% leak. I pushed to 13 workers for wave 7, and was this a good idea? Definitely not. Except for 2 atoms and 1 wild shroom, my damage is entirely magic based, which really struggles on wave 7, which is an arcane wave. Since we had been incoming all game, and wave 6 was a long wave, I should have known that I would get a big resend. Remember friends, do as I say and not as I do. If you know you're weak on a wave, try to overbuild a bit and hold their send as best as you can. After you hold, then you can push really hard. Anyway, I leaked pretty bad, but thankfully my ally does cover me. However, I do need to start holding so my ally can push a bit himself and not have to worry about covering my full leaks. So for wave 8, I added a Priestess of the Abyss. It's a good unit for here, and if they don't send, I have enough income to upgrade it to an Azaria for wave 9. They ended up not sending, and it's probably going to be a wave 9 send as my ally has both Berserker, Head Chef, and Deep Queller, and they do not want to go into that on wave 10. I sold my Seraphim instead of some of my other quote-unquote trash units to get the Azaria for wave 9. You can click on a unit to see its attack range, and I feared the Seraphim would make the Azaria not tank anything, which is a huge part of why Azaria is a good unit. Unfortunately, I suck at Azaria now, and still ended up with her not tanking anything, so I do leak pretty big. Thankfully, my ally covers and leaks the guy he's sitting into. Phoenix is actually the true MVP of this game so far. He's pushing, he's starving for me, and he's covering all of my leaks. I pushed really hard for the wave 10 as my ally was really strong here, and I knew he would cover anything that I leaked. They did send me pretty big on 10, and one Berserker just wasn't going to cut it, so I do end up leaking pretty heavily. My ally had not been sent, so I did not full push this time. Remember friends, teamwork makes the dream work. Wave 11, and I already had the Azaria, so I just dropped a full Golem, so I could finally cover for my ally whenever he does get sent. I knew it was going to be an 11 or 12 into him, as his board is looking pretty strong on wave 13, and I doubted they wanted to skip all the way to 14. No send here on 11, everybody holds, and it's gotta be that wave 12. I added another full Golem, and actually hardened one, expecting a send would come into both of us. However, they only sent it into my ally, and he actually barely leaked anything at all, and I covered whatever he didn't. I even pushed a worker to a no send, because if you see the guy sending it to me is 400 over, that means he has a really low worker count, and even when he does send, it wouldn't be that much. Wave 13, and I kind of went for some mind games here. I built the Fatalizer so when they checked our board, they would get excited and send us on wave 14. What they didn't know is that I was shifting the rest of my gold for a full Doomsday. Plus, Fatalizer is still pretty good Swift tank, and because of his ramping damage, still does pretty okay on wave 14. And look at this, my Azaria is finally tanking how she's supposed to. Just imagine if she had split this well on wave 9. This game would be so much easier right now. Okay, but wave 14 is here, and I drop my full Doomsday. If I can get my Azaria to pro tank again, I have a really good shot of holding this wave. I do get a 760 send, but if you think about it, it was a 4-wave starve, and this send could have been way worse. Thankfully, he was overbuilt, and this is all he could send. I only hardened one Golem, which in hindsight was probably a bit of a bad play, but it's okay. My Azaria tanks pretty well, and because of my Polllywogs, the wave wraps around so that when everything else has died, my Azaria and Doomsday are split tanking the rest of the wave. It goes really well, and I only leaked the Needler at very low health. If I had hardened the other Golem, I definitely full hold, and even cover some of my allies' leak. It's okay though, we've got full king and barely take any damage. Since I had pushed to no sends and was incoming every wave, I soar way to the top of the power score. I go all the way to 42 workers on wave 15, and it's time for us to plan our next send. Looking at what they've built on wave 15, it's probably not a wave 16 send. Yellow can go for some pyros and already has 2 Arctears. Teal has the super doppel and a couple of pyroskeletons. Our hope was that they would overbuild for wave 16, and we can get them good on wave 17. Wave 16 comes, and let's check. Yep, yellow did add some pyros, but teal prepped a bit for wave 17 and added the Doomsday. It's wave 17, and everybody is probably sending here. I pushed way too many workers to skip, and figured after this, I would never have to build another worker and let my ally full push for our next send. I added one more Doomsday and some tanks, good for the wave, and the person I'm sending into has a lot of Crab Warlocks, so I went for 3 Witches, He also has a lot of AoE with the Arctear, Pyros, and Aquas, so I sent a Hermit as well. The Dragon Turtles were definitely not the best set in the world, but it would stall the Halo for a little bit, as it was his biggest damage for the wave. And would a Mole or Pack or more DPS have been better? Most definitely. I did add another Witch after income, and it's time to see if we made the correct play. My ally sent 2 Ghost Knights as the person he was thinking to, already had a Doomsday and might go for another, or just spend some Treants. Either way, Ghost Knight is a good tank and damage typing for them. I did make sure to double harden here, as the send was definitely coming. They didn't have the value to skip here, and they didn't want to go 18 into my Azaria and Fatalizers, while my ally also had Fatalizers with Lifesteal and Orchids. Remember how good those Pollywogs were on wave 14? Well, I forgot to sell them for wave 17, and I ended up getting my Doomsdays killed before my tanks, and I leaked a little bit. Almost a throw, but everyone leaked, and we all took a good bit of king damage. Thankfully, we were income king all game, while they were trying to break us, so they had no king ups and took a bit more damage than we did, and actually almost died. It's now time for my ally to full push. Neither of us were leaking on 18, and we really needed to go for a 19 win. It was the weakest wave for everybody in the game. We all had really good builds for wave 20. Phoenix and I having the double Phaedas, and me having the Doomsdays. Yellow had Arctears, Zeus, and Halos, which are all good on wave 20, while Teal had the Doomsday, Starcallers, and Steeds, which are also really good on 20. I added another Azaria and a bunch of Golems. Azaria was my best DPS for the wave, and the 2 Doomsdays should help clear out a Kraken send. After making sure to protect the Azarias with some Pollywogs, I was ready for the send. For me, I sent a Witch for the crabs, a Shaman because he doesn't really have the tanks for the wave, so it should help melt through what he does have. A Hermit for the AoE, and some more Dragon Turtles for some reason. I don't know why, but they did decide to skip, which is crazy to me, because I was for sure Giga holding wave 20, and so was Phoenix. But we broke through, and ended up taking the win. I think they Giga through on the split send on wave 12, and the 14 double send. But part of that was me baiting them for the 14 send, and dropping the Doomsday, and pretty much full covering. Alright there friends, that's it for me, and I hope you enjoyed the game, and maybe even learned something. I'll see you next week for another top game with a tier 1 video.